What's going on, 3DMJers? We're back with the latest installment of Believe. I know it's been a while, but this is going to be a short one, but also an exciting and an important one. The first thing that's pretty cool, it has been a full year of me in my off-season now since I did WNBF Worlds in 2023 and made my pro debut. Now I've had a full year of my first pro off-season, and we're thinking ahead to competing in 2025. So, what is this year in retrospect? Well, I think I've done a fantastic job, but it's really an interesting thing to realize that I have made great progress for myself, but probably inadequate progress to compete with the monsters that are the top levels and the top echelon of the WNBF pro men's bodybuilding ranks. So nonetheless, since I've made such good progress, I am confident to go out there and just see how the chips fall. And I know at the very least that I will have improved upon the package that I brought in 2023, even if it's not enough for me to start climbing the ranks in the WNBF pros. But I've been very encouraged by the progress I've made in this last year to make me think that I'm not done yet. I can keep making progress into my early and mid 40s, being 41 now. I'll be turning 42 next year, probably around the time I start contest prep. And I'm just really stoked to see that I'm making physique changes still. As long as I'm willing to put in the time and effort, I think there's still a little bit more left for me to gain, despite having lifted for 20 years. So, what's the next step? Well, the next step is actually game planning. So I sat down and I talked to both Brian Miner and Alberto Nunez, my coaches right now at the moment, both in the off-season and in prep, and I had them take a look at a physique display. So I went through the mandatory poses, symmetry round, and muscularity round at my current condition where I'm between 91 and 92 kilos. So that means I am actually about 25 pounds over stage weight, or roughly between 11 to 13 kilos. Now, this is the peak of my off season if I'm going to diet down next year, but I'm not going to diet down from here. As you're probably well aware, we have our prep positioning course, and this is a strategy that we use at 3DMJ to put our athletes in the best position to do really, really well. So if you're not familiar with the concept of a body fat set point, I'd be surprised, but body fat set points are not the best representation of how our bodies actually operate. There's not just a single point where if we get leaner than it, we all of a sudden start to experience metabolic adaptation, our body starts pushing back, and if we go above it, the opposite happens. Rather, there's a range, our upper intervention point and our lower intervention point, where between those two ranges, that is where we're more or less quote-unquote physiologically normal. But if we try to go below it, we get pushback. And if we try to go above it, some people, but not everyone, gets pushback, hence the obesity epidemic. So these physiological points are more of a continuum rather than two distinct points, but theoretically it's useful to think of the best place to start contest prep as close to your lower intervention point as possible. This is before you start experiencing metabolic adaptation, any kind of symptoms of low energy availability. When you're able to eat a lot of food, you're not chronically hungry or food focused, your libido's normal, and you're physiologically functioning just fine. But you're also as lean as you can be while feeling that way. So essentially, this is the diet before the diet. Where do I go from here at around 91, 92 kilos if I know I need to get all the way down to my last stage weight or close to my last stage weight of dipping just under 80 kilos? And hopefully, I'm a little heavier on stage, but we never know. We've made a lot of progress, and at the very least, I know I'll look better even if my scale weight is similar by the time I step on stage. So right now, we're planning to get on stage in that same range, touching down under 80 kilos, and to go to 80 kilos or just under, I don't want to start at 91, 92. I actually want to start closer to around 90 or just under that. So the game plan is to actually, now that I've had a full year of being in a surplus, to take a mini cut. And the goal is to diet down to 86 kilos from where I am here at 91, 92, or about 190 pounds, and then to spend the rest of January, February, and March actually coming slowly back up to around 193 or 87, 87 and a half kilos. So you might be wondering, what will this mini cut consist of? How am I going to do it? Well, it won't be that complicated. We're going to keep it really simple. At breakfast, I typically have a fair amount of calories, approaching 800, 900, and this just has been what I've needed to do to keep up the pace of gains that I've had this off season to get up to this current body weight. And I often will have, a bowl of porridge or oats, as they call it in the States. And I'll also have some type of side of salmon or something like that on top of that to get the protein count up. And then I have a little bit of the leftovers of whatever my wife doesn't finish. So I'm simply going to replace the porridge with like eggs on toast, and then have some veggies on the side and just not eat my wife's leftovers. That's going to be cutting around 200 to 300 calories out of breakfast. And then at lunch, I'm just going to go from having 2 big pieces of fruit to 1, cutting out another 100, 150 calories depending upon the choice of fruit in a given day. And then at dinner, I'm going to be cutting back just a little bit, having a slightly leaner option, cooking at home typically, and if we do go out, just making really intelligent decisions, or if we get takeaway, and probably cutting between 200 to 300, maybe even 400 calories there. And that is going to produce probably a net deficit of between 500 to 700 calories a day from where I'm at currently. But I'm also planning to try to keep my step count more consistently around 10K per day versus the 8 to 9 that it's been. So I think I'll probably lose a good chunk of weight, and I think I'll be able to get to where I want to get probably within 6 weeks, maybe faster depending upon how bloated I currently am at this current 91 to 92. Finally, as far as my training, it's going to stay the same. I'm currently in a specialization phase, which is actually a nice fit because I've reduced volume on some of the more challenging exercises that are more demanding, that seem to be impacted more when I'm dieting. So I'm doing less RDLs, for example. I'm dropping a set off most of my glute and ham work, and I'm doing a few less pressing sets to make up for doing more back work. So I think overall that's a good timing. The specialization phase should enable me to not have to modify my training too much, but I'm also going to be very open to taking any types of flexible deloads or just cutting volume back here and there while I do this mini cut if that seems to be necessary. But I'm not going to do it proactively, I'll do it reactively. So I'll have a couple months as I plan to finish this mini cut by the end of December in a surplus, or at least around a slight surplus or maintenance-ish range, kind of gaintaining, to get back up to a point where I know that I'm not compromised in terms of metabolic adaptation or lower energy availability, but I'm also nice and lean to get in really good striking condition, or to be in really good striking distance so I can get in fantastic condition. Because the biggest weapon I have is that I'm pretty good at getting very lean. I seem to not lose muscle when doing so, and if I can get just absolutely peeled and maybe even improve upon that aspect of my prep from 2023, combined with a new level of muscularity, who knows, maybe I'll make a dent. So that's the plan, folks. I'll check in at the end of this mini cut where I'm actually touching down into the mid 80s, or right around 190 pounds. And then we'll follow through with all the way until I start my prep at the end of my prep positioning back up around 87.5 or into the low 190s. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for following me through this end of 2024. And now we're going to go into 2025.